Chapter 10 Presentation: The Neolithic Revolution. The Domestication of Plants and Animals. Chapter 10 Outline. So we're going to cover the Mesolithic roots of farming and pastoralism, the Neolithic Revolution, which is also known as the New Stone Age, and this also might be one of my questions on our next test. The domestication what? Why we became food producers, all about fertility in the Fertile Crescent, not Croissant, and some other centers of domestication. That's a whole lot. Let's get started. When the Neolithic Age began, also known as the Stone Age, it was revolutionary to human history. Instead of only food foraging to feed ourselves, we began food production to supplement our diets. Mesolithic roots of farming and pastoralism. Most of the northern hemisphere was covered by ice by the end of the Paleolithic periods, and humans had begun migrating all over the planet. Then about 12,000 years ago, when the ice started melting, sea levels began to rise. The once dry lakes and rivers were flooded and began changing the face of the planet. New water sources and new forests drove many animals closer to humans. In Europe, Asia, and Africa, this transitional period between the Paleolithic and the Neolithic is called the Mesolithic, or Middle Stone Age. In the Americas, comparable cultures are referred to as archaic cultures.
Around 15,000 years ago, the climate began to change. The glaciers melted, and with water, the world came back to life. One of the best places for humans to live now was an area of the Middle East we called the Fertile Crescent, from Israel to Iraq. The hills were dotted with trees, which spread quickly as the weather improved. The open woodlands were like a garden, supporting a new range of edible plants. Animals flourished on the uplands and fertile plains. It was a hunter-gatherer's paradise. It was here that travelling bands found something completely new, which would change humanity forever. They discovered a huge family of plants, the grasses. It was a vast supply of grain.
With the discovery of grains and seeds, our diets changed to more root and plant-based, along with fish. They were all abundant in the post-glacier period. The ultimate source of all cultural change is innovation, any new idea, method, or device that gains widespread acceptance in society. Along with the post-glacial change to the environment came new technology in the form of better stone-ground tools. The microlith was a small, hard-shaped blade with the characteristic tool of the Mesolithic era. Microliths were small and easy to carry and also easy to make. And often this small tool would be attached to some sort of stick, so they could use that as another innovative tool to hunt with. This microlith tool existed about 40,000 years ago in Africa. However, they didn't become common elsewhere until the Mesolithic era. The Natufians were able to cut wheat quickly because of the arc-shaped tool they had called the sickle. Have you ever wondered how our ancestors were able to make clay figurines some 35,000 years ago? It was most likely a chance discovery of clay around campfires. And clay hardens when it's exposed to high heat, and with this, primary innovation began with the molding and shaping of clay figurines and pottery making. A secondary innovation is the modification of an existing method, idea, or device. For example, the clay figurines method was applied to making pottery, and that is secondary innovation. Domestication. What? Not this type of domestication, but this kind. Simply defined, domestication is a process by where humans modify, either intentionally or unintentionally, the genetic makeup of a population of plants or animals, sometimes to the extent that the members of the population are unable to survive or reproduce without human assistance. The evidence of early plant domestication is an increase in size, a reduction in natural seed dispersal, perhaps loss of delayed seed germination, which is important during times of extreme weather. Also the ripening of the seed and the fruit together, and a loss of the natural protective methods, like the encasing husk. Paleobotanists can tell when a plant fossil is a natural or a domesticated one by looking at the size and shape of the fossil. Early evidence of animal domestication changed the skeletal structure of some animals, like the horns on wild sheep and goats. They are different from the horns on their domesticated relatives.
Here, at Wadi Hammer, in northern Jordan, the Natufians left minute traces of their lives. Archaeologist Philip Edwards has found evidence that these nomads had everything they needed in one place.
They're well placed here. They're on water, and they are positioned between the lowlands of the Jordan Valley and the uplands of the Mediterranean hills behind. In fact, the Jordan Valley, when the Natufian people were here, was filled by a lake, Lake Lazan, which extended right up and right past the scene here. And looking over that, we would see, if it was a clear day, Mount Carmel peeping out on the coast, the site where the Natufian was discovered originally by Dorothy Garrett.
Archaeologists estimate there were no more than 1,000 families living in the whole of Israel and Jordan at the time. There was enough grain to feed them well, and it was all growing wild.
Now, archaeologists have experimented in harvesting wild cereals in their natural area in the Middle East. And what they found is that one person harvesting for a period of about 3 weeks can produce enough food to feed a family of 4 for a whole year.
These ancient grasses are the forerunners of modern crops. The grains discovered by the Natufians still feed more than half the world's population today. Of all the things they ate, grain was unique in one vital way. It did not decay. Keep it dry, and it lasts for decades. For the first time, they had food they could rely on for long periods of time.
When the glaciers melted and retreated northward, so did the rain patterns, and as a result, areas that were rich in greenery simply dried up. It forced humans and animals alike to gather around these water sources that were very rare, much like oases. The theory is that we began gathering seeds and planting them and farming them and cultivating them, as well as domesticating the animals since they were in such abundance around the water sources that we were. I don't know, I guess I'm just saying, who wants to go out and forage for your food for survival when you can start working the land and planting the seeds and obviously domesticating the animals because they were coming right in your area. However, in our innovative struggle to survive and thrive, farming changed the symbiotic relationship that man had with nature. There was an applied and shared knowledge about food foraging. So humans knew what to look for, what I can eat, what I can't eat, where to find the nuts and berries and plants and seeds that we need to cultivate to grow larger farms. The earliest domesticates also began carrying and drinking water out of inedible gourds. Our ancestors used this working and shared knowledge and passed it on from generation to generation. And obviously they began to convert the land into working resources of sustainability for their stagnant communities. They didn't have to move around anymore once they were acquired all around some type of oasis or water source. There is also early evidence in northern Australia of where people actually redirected water through canals of the creeks and the rivers to irrigate their crops. The Fertile Crescent is the long arc-shaped sweep of rivers and valleys and coastal plains extending from the Sudan all the way to Iraq. Evidence today shows that the earliest domestication of plants was a gradual process over several millennia. The farmers were able to produce rye and wheat as much as 13,000 years ago. The Natufians, who were a foraging people or hunter and gatherers, began to gather annuals. They would look for seeds and plants which were best adapted to climate instability and which would complete their plant life cycle within 12 months. Annuals were also able to be stored. They also were able to have their reproductive ability dormant until the next wet season. This was important for the sustainability of the Natufian communities. And now on to our final subtopic, other centers of domestication. In China, the domestication of rice dates back to about 11,000 years ago along the Yangtze River. Southeast Asia is primarily known for vegiculture, the growing of many species together in one field, like yams and taro. It's like root crop farming. The Andean highlands of Peru was best known for farming potatoes, of which there were 3,000 variety of them compared to the 250 we grow today on farms. And horticulture is the cultivation of crops carried out with simple hand tools, such as digging sticks or hoes. Horticulturists use a small space to grow a variety of plants, and typically all the work is done by hand due to the size of the small gardens. This concludes my part of Chapter 10, The Neolithic Revolution. Thank you. Now time for our crossword puzzle.